morning, everyone, and welcome to our Clusters Talks. It's great to see people attending in July. I know everyone's busy with plans for the summer, but we are going today to talk about the chemicals industry and advancing the transition. Of course, the chemicals industry is vast across the EU, and many goods that are manufactured in the EU rely on that industry. So it is across various other sectors as well. But like all sectors in the EU, it is looking at making the just, digital, and green transition to a more resilient EU economy. Back in January 2023, the European Commission published the transition pathway for the chemical industry, identifying around 190 actions that can be taken to make those transitions. And of course, today we're going to look a bit more closely at that as we have seen the report on the first achievements of the implementation of the transition pathway in the industry. So we will look at that, we will have a panel discussion, and we will have presentations. So our agenda today is, as always, news from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. Then we will have that presentation from DG Grow before our panel discussion, and wrapping up, as always, with the funding opportunities for the cluster. So do stay to the very end to hear that. As usual, our normal housekeeping rules apply. If you would like to join in the discussion, we will be using Slido to launch polls and get everyone's input. We'll be using the chat function to allow people to say hello, to share links, but do use the Q&A function down at the bottom of the screen to post specific questions during the panel discussion. We'll try to get to as many of those as well. If you want to join in, you want to put on your microphone, or you'd like to switch your camera on and become part of our discussion today, just raise your hand and we will take a couple of moments to get it set up, and we will allow you to be joining our panelists on screen as well to make your points. Do note that if you do that, the session is recorded, of course, and the recording will be published on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, so you can check it out afterwards. If you want to go back and check any slides as well, we'll try and make sure everyone gets to have a good look at all the discussions today so nothing is missed. I'm going to hand over now, as always, to start things off, the news from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. So over to Nina Hoppen. Nina, what are we watching out for this summer?
Good morning, Jennifer, and many thanks. Good morning to all of you. We have a lot of sessions in store for you that you might want to connect to or come to in person. Let's start with the last drop-in session for before the summer today at 4, which is offered by the colleagues from the ECCP to get you engaged in any questions that you have respective to the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, its functionalities, and how you can make best use of the ECCP in your work. So if you have any technical questions regarding your profile, how to create it, how to update it, how to maximize the experience that you have on the platform with all the wealth of information that is available to you. Or if you want to, for example, access the Trend Universe, which is a tool available that you have not used it yet, or anything else that crosses your mind, you can connect today at 4, the last drop-in session for the summer, then before we return with the drop-in sessions in autumn. So register still now, and then you can join us this afternoon with your questions and get the answers you need. And then maybe also during the summer, you can work on your profile and work on the information that you find on the ECCP for your cluster. We also invite you to join the C2 Lab, which is an interactive workshop to work on your next project proposal, which will take place in Strasbourg in France on the 25th and 26th of September. And here you will have the possibility to meet new partners, discuss your project ideas, and initiate new collaborations, for example, to apply together for a European call. And you can either join with a concrete project proposal that you already have in mind and for which you need more new collaboration partners, or by offering your knowledge to others and joining project consortium. We will hold an info session on the C2 Lab tomorrow at 11. So please connect if you want to learn more about the C2 Lab and whether this is the right place for you to come at the end of September. If you're more looking into advancing your skills as a cluster manager, We have the Cluster Booster Academy for you, which is an academy for up to 50 participants running in total for 5 days, which is divided into 3 online training sessions and 2 in-person training sessions, which will take place at the beginning of March next year. And the Cluster Booster Academy will provide learning opportunities for you to develop the skills to see what kind of needs you have in terms of cluster management in your daily work and learn from each other's experiences, as well as to improve the skills also of the cluster staff by a train the trainer approach. So have a look at the Cluster Booster Academy if you feel like this is the right place for you to join us. And if you're more interested in discussing the role of clusters in the industrial ecosystems in your region and how to connect with policymakers from different levels, so from local to regional to national level, and to hear some good examples and practices of how clusters can play an active role in the regional economies, then come to our Clusters Meet Regions events. We already have 4 lined up for the rest of the year. In October and November, we invite you to Moldova, to Spain, to Germany, and to Belgium. You'll see the concrete places and dates here in the screen, but also when you click on the link in the chat. So you can already save the dates for these events, and we will discuss with you together how to improve the collaboration between clusters and regional stakeholders for the industrial development of regions. And last but not least, please be reminded of the cutoff date for our EU-India matchmaking event, which is the 16th of July. And if you're looking into any C2C, C2B, or B2B collaborations with partners from India, we invite you to join our European delegation, which will travel to Bengaluru in India for the Bengaluru Tech Summit to hold a matchmaking event on the 19th until the 21st of November. The focus areas will be biotech, digital, green tech, and advanced manufacturing. And you will have the possibility to meet potential new business partners from India at our matchmaking event. So as I said, cutoff date is the 16th of July. If you're interested, please express your interest now to join our European delegation to India. And with that, I think there's a lot of events going on for you to choose from. Let's dive into our topic of the day. So back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Nina. Indeed, advanced manufacturing and digital and green tech, we may end up discussing a little bit today as we move on to our presentation from the European Commission, Transition Pathway for the Chemical Industry. And we are delighted Albert Dume from DG Grow is going to talk us through that. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and thanks a lot for this great opportunity of being here and present the work we are doing with the transition pathway for the chemical industry. Indeed, it's extremely relevant for me to be part of this discussion because it is indeed about how we advance the transformation of the EU chemical industry. And the pathway is about that. You can go to the next slide. It's about solving the equation between competitiveness on one side and addressing also the green and digital transition for the EU chemical industry. In a nutshell, it is a roadmap which outlines around 190 actions which have to be taken by industry, the EU, or member states. And it is structured around the 8 building blocks, 8 main pillars, which are necessary for the transformation of the sector and to uphold its competitive edge. Sustainable competitiveness, which addresses the question how we can invest in more safe and sustainable chemicals. Then we look at research and innovation, which is pretty much tailored with access to funding. Then, of course, regulatory aspects, which entail both vertical coherence of regulations, that means at EU and member states level, and also horizontal level, that means across value chains. Then we look at the access to energy and feedstocks, which are 2 important aspects of the chemical industry, because as we know, it's pretty much dependent on fossil fuels, both used as process energy, but also as raw materials in the different products which are put into the market. And finally, we look also at skills and the social dimension of the green and digital transition. In the next slide, you have a more precise outline of what the pathway is about. I mentioned already the 8 building blocks, which constitute the main skeleton of the document. But in these building blocks, we have the so-called topics. And within the topics, we have the 190 actions. I'm not going to all the details of what are the topics and the single actions, but in the next slide, I will show an example of how the pathway exactly works. It is about sustainable competitiveness. So this chapter focuses pretty much on the challenges that the chemical industry is facing when it comes to making this great amount of investments needed to transform how things are done and what is done, and at the same time try to address also the challenge of facing increased international competitions, which is shown also by the trend of the sales, which show that Europe is still the second largest producer in the world, but at the same time, China is taking an increase in market share. And this is a trend which has happened over the last 15 years. The action that the pathway suggests to tackle all these challenges focus, for instance, on how to monitor these trends, first of all, but also to how to create a market for sustainable products. And this is something that we are also looking at specifically more now. Other actions that the pathway suggests are measures to develop partnerships to de-risk investments. And it shows exactly in detail what are the actors and what is the time frame for implementation of these actions. When we mention short term in the pathway, we indicate those actions that should be implemented as soon as possible. And when it comes to medium terms by 2030 and also the 2050 net zero ambitions. So if we go now to the next slide, I will show more in depth what we are currently doing to translate the pathway into reality, because the pathway as such is a strategic document, but now is the time for the co-implementation to make these measures concrete and translate them into structural solutions. We started this process in March 2023, following the publication of the pathway. And first of all, we decided to have a more structural approach when it comes to the dialogue that we have with stakeholders. And to this end, we have set up a specific commission dedicated expert group. And within this expert group, we have also specific task forces of experts which focus on high priority topics and actions of the pathway. These are namely energy and feedstock, and also the market creation aspect that I will touch upon a bit later through my presentation. In the meantime, we're also looking at regulations. What are the different developments which are relevant for the chemical industry? And we discuss them with stakeholders. And we also look at funding aspects. So how to improve the communication on funding opportunities to support projects for the twin transition. And to this end, we published a guidance this year. We also took stock of what has been done so far. And the results that we got are displayed in this slide. And we saw that within the scope of the 187 actions, about 80% of these have already started. They have been launched, with 11% already finalized. Based on this qualitative assessment, we saw that if we look at the legislative proposals, the policies taken, and the actions taken by industry, we are well on track with what is outlined in the roadmap. In the next slide, I will provide a more precise picture of what we got from industry side. We launched in July a call for initiatives. That means concrete projects, investments, for instance, carbon capture and storage, carbon capture utilization, electrification of crackers, that industry is undertaking in order to support what we have in the pathway. We got around 112 projects. These are published in the Commission website, and this call is still open for new submissions. And I take the opportunity to make the invitation to you to disseminate the fact that we have this call open, because it's important for us to collect this information. Not just because this informs the entire implementation process and how we monitor the progress towards the transition and the objectives of the pathway, but it's important for us also to inform our policy making, because we see to some extent what are the key focus areas where investments are happening. And the initial results show that energy feedstock infrastructure, but also substitution of hazardous chemicals and digitalizations are the main areas whereby industry, but also other stakeholders are pretty much focusing on. On the next slide, we look at more what we are doing. So this is the work that has been undertaken by the task forces of experts that are working with us to see how we can stimulate the demand of those products which are made from alternative feedstocks to fossil carbon. So we look essentially at carbon from carbon capture utilization, at biomass and waste. And we're trying to address the question how we can stimulate the demand. Because at the end of the day, it's a question of industrial deployment of new technologies, but also creating the demand for the products that will come out of these new technologies. So it's about creating the pull and push mechanisms to ensure that we make the transition happening. The measures we're looking at, and this is just an initial categorization, and it's based on the suggestion from stakeholders, entail sustainable carbon targets, for instance, bio-based content, labels for final products. We are looking also at the demand that comes from the public sector. That means green public procurement criteria. And an example would be also taking inspiration from other schemes, non-EU ones, for instance, the Biopreferred program in the US, sustainable finance. But we are also looking at price incentives because ultimately new products might have higher cost, and for that demand, which is price driven, for instance, for commodities, we are also looking at how we can reduce the cost of the final product and consumers so that we ensure the market is catered for this type of products. Another aspect we are looking at are the regulations. Next slide, please. That's a complicated slide, which is regulatory roadmap that we had also in the original document of the pathway. This is an updated version that we have included in our progress report, which shows what are the relevant pieces of legislation for the chemical sector, the timeline for adoption by the co-legislator, and also what is the timeline for implementation. I would like just to stress a few points, which are the updates, how we changed it comparatively to the initial version. We introduced the Net Zero Industry Act, which is a key EU piece of legislation recently adopted, which entails actually how to scale up the manufacturing and the deployment of clean. And to this end, it introduces several tools. I would like to mention shorter permitting procedures for certain key technologies and also regulatory access. And if you go to the next slide, I would like also to mention the industrial carbon management communication, which aligns pretty much with the work that we have done under the task force for the market application aspects, because it focuses on how we can deploy the different carbon capture and storage, carbon capture utilization, but also carbon removal technologies for hard activators, which will rely on carbon as a main feedstock, and the chemical sector is indeed part of the communication. And those 2040 targets, which suggest an indicative 90% greenhouse gas emissions reduction target by 2040. It's just about regulations, of course, it's also about funding support. And we're looking at this aspect to enable the transformation of the chemical industry, which is for reaching climate neutrality targets by 2050. And you can go to the next slide, actually. So we were well aware of the fact the funding programs in the EU are pretty much fragmented and the procedures to apply are complex. So we were trying to figure out how to improve the way we provide information to. Oh, is the sound working well?
We can hear you and we can certainly see your slides. So I know you have only a couple left, so possibly I'll just persevere.
Okay, good. No, because I read okay, I go just quicker. So essentially, we wanted just to facilitate the way we convey information to companies about what is offered under the EU funding schemes. And we made a guidance, which is published on our website, and we plan also to update it, which shows 11 funding programs, and you can go to the next slide actually, which are relevant for the transformation of the EU chemical industry. And for each of these funding programs, we have outlined the open calls, what are the projects which are supported, and who can apply. I mentioned a few of them, which are pretty much relevant, and I saw there's a lot of initiatives going on, which are the innovation funds, which focuses pretty much on the deployment of technologies, whilst Horizon Europe looks more at the research and innovation aspects. And I would like also to mention that in the next version, we plan to introduce STEP, which is the Strategic Technologies for Europe platform, which is a new approach of targeting new fundings to biotech, digital, and clean tech projects. And STEP has actually been adopted very, very recently and is online now on the EU Commission website. With that being said, I would like also to announce the project that we have in the pipeline, which is the platform for industrial ecosystems. If you can go to the next slide. This project actually is based on the idea that the pathways as such based their own success on the fact that stakeholders can communicate and collaborate together, because this is essentially a bottom-up approach to policy making. And we wanted to create a one-stop shop where everyone who is interested in a certain ecosystem can find all the documents, all the news, all the information also about funding and relation in a very straightforward manner. The platform is not in there yet. It will be published by the end of the year, early 2025. But we hope that this will be a great tool for all industry members and also other interested parties to just collaborate, have discussions on how they can enable the transformation, and also have matchmaking opportunities. With that being said, I would like just to conclude with some concluding remarks on my side. Just last slide. What is just important in this whole exercise of the co-implementation is to have this collaborative approach and this high engagement from stakeholders, because this was what triggered the whole exercise, what triggered innovativeness and synergies, and make the pathway such a comprehensive and holistic document. I think it's important to maintain the momentum in this regard, and that's why I reiterate my invitation to submit transition initiatives, because this is something that we are currently using to inform all our internal discussions and also eventually the next Commission work program. So it's important from our side to build on the pathway to make the twin transition happen. That we are all on the same page in this regard, and then I leave just the floor to you to have a discussion, to continue this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And we can see there on the screen ways to contact you to find out more. And we've shared in the chat as well the links for everyone. I know the sound was a little bit coming and going, but I think people were probably able to follow along with those slides, the main points, because of course, 190 actions sounds very daunting, so it's important to have them for us. Let's turn now to our Slido discussion. We do want everyone to get involved. So you can scan the QR code there that you see on the screen with your smartphones, or you can go to slido.com and put in the code chemicals. That will take you to the page where we are asking for the first question: which area or sector of the chemical industry do you operate in? So that's a free form. You can type in the sector that you are able to take part in, or the area that you are most interacting with. I don't see anyone typing as yet. We'll leave it there for a few more moments. So I remind you once again of the housekeeping rules for our panel discussion, which is coming up next. So if you do want to join in that discussion, you can use the raise hand function. You'll see that down on the bottom of the screen, and we will then invite you to connect your microphone and your camera. You can switch on, and we will allow you to join in the discussion with our panelists. You're also welcome to use the Q&A slot at the bottom of your screen as well, and that will be questions that I will see popping up, which we can try and get to our panelists during the run of our panel discussion. And of course, please do use the chat if you want to share any useful links to your fellow participants and to maybe send them in the direction of some of the topics we're talking about. In terms of the sectors that people are operating in, as we can see there, manufacturing was the first one. I thought it rather might be, but we're also seeing cosmetics. Somebody else here is representing the whole value chain of the plastic industry. So obviously the chemicals are hugely important in underpinning that. Fostering green transition in multiple sectors. Again, we can see that that's going to be sort of cross-cutting. The interesting thing about today's discussion is that it is so cross-cutting. It's not just single verticals that we're talking about. I see some more people putting in processes and the circular economy. Ceramics, that's rather interesting. Chemical association, of course, no surprise that you're here today because obviously this is central. And we are also seeing, I see a few more people typing. What else have we got? More manufacturing, I think, as well as coating. Okay, we'll let you type away. We'll keep that on the back of our minds as we look at our second question. Electrifying organic synthesis of chemicals. Okay, lots of technical expertise in our discussions then today. So, Nina, if we can move on to our second slide question, which is the most critical challenge faced by the EU chemical industry? And this is a multiple choice question for you. So it can be digital transformation, regulations, raw materials prices, supply chain management, or competition from emerging countries or other. We haven't given you the option to say all of the above because we know that all of the above are challenges that that are faced in this industry. But it's coming to the point of view of which do you think is probably the most important one to deal with at the moment. So let's have a look. We're seeing, well, I'm going to let people vote because we've only got 7-8 votes so far. Supply chain management not getting a great deal of traction, although also staying pretty low. But it looks like digital transformation, competition from emerging countries, and regulations and raw materials prices are topping the interests of the attendees here today. And of course, this is an entirely non-scientific poll. It's just to get a little bit of a sense of what's exercising the minds of everyone joining today. And it'll also give us a steer as we go to our panel discussion. So competition for emerging countries there seeming to be top, then digital transformation of raw materials prices, rather about the same with 33% each, and then other considerations lower down the list. So with that, I'm going to ask my panelists to please switch on their microphones and their cameras. And we are delighted to have joining us here today for our discussion. I have joining me here, we have Athanasios Konstanopoulos, who is Chief Scientific Advisor at the Chorus Cluster and Professor of Chemical Engineering at Aristotle University.
Good morning.
Malga, good morning, very nice to see you, Athanas. Malga Vok is European Projects and Collaboration Manager at Accelera. Monica Banca is Network and Policy Coordinator at the European Chemical Regions Network, and Susan Costello joins us as Network Director from Biopharma Chem SkillNet. And I know we will be talking about skills as well. So thank you very much for joining us. I will do a quick round to allow everyone to introduce themselves, tell us a bit about what you're working on, and maybe also give me a sense of your first reaction to some of those polls that we started off with at the beginning. So Athanasios, let me start with you. Tell us what you're most interested in and what is keeping you awake at night when it comes to thinking about the future transitions for the chemical industry.
Well, we are a cluster of small companies and a little bit larger companies in the general area of sustainable energy and circular economy. We have activities in petrochemicals, in biowaste, in polymers, in catalysts and reactors, both in R&D and in production. And the major issue is always cost of raw materials, being able to deliver in a universal market, in a global market, products that have to face a lot of regulations compared with some other countries. And right now, there is a very important challenge that I think is the major is energy and feedstocks for replacing fossil-based raw materials with defossilized, let's say, resources.
So I think you would have voted for raw materials as being a big chief consideration in that first Slido poll.
Raw materials and competition, because it is, these things, they go together. Of course, in a global economy, sometimes you are forced to leave the EU and go elsewhere in order to stay alive.
Monica, let me come to you next and get your perspective. Tell us what's making you focus your attention on and your reaction to that first poll, and a little bit about your work.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation and opportunity to be here and to talk about our network and what we do and what's our view on the current situation of the chemical industry. So maybe I'm going to start with the very, very brief introduction. So the European Chemical Regions Network has already 20 years of experience in gathering the regions where the chemical industry plays an important role in the economy, growth or employment. And in general, we present a single voice of these regions. So we take part in the public consultations, we prepare position papers, and also we create a knowledge exchange platform where our members can share their best practices, present it. We also foster interregional cooperation. We organize different types of events, also internal, external, and we also try to engage always the EU institutions to present what our regions have in their mind. And also we facilitate the project participation, not only by helping to find partners for our members, but also as a network, we are engaged in several EU-funded projects. And regarding the situation and what was presented, so I also voted on the critical raw materials and international competitiveness. So I would say that are the most crucial problems, let's say, the chemical industry is facing right now. And of course, the digitalization. And in this case, the digitalization is very related to the skills. And this is something that is very high on our agenda right now. And we have a couple of projects related to the both skills in general, but also with a huge focus on digital skills. So maybe that's all for now.
Yeah, we will certainly come back around to talking about digital skills in particular within the context of our conversation about skilling. Malga, turning to you, what's your organization's activities in the field of chemicals and what's your members' chief concerns?
Yeah, hello everyone. Well, actually, I'm representing Accelera, which is a French cluster of chemicals. We are localized in Lyon, next to the Chemical Valley. So actually, the core of the activities is really in our area. Next to our borders, we are neighboring with a lot of different companies that are actually concerned by this digital and green transition. Well, actually, there's been many things that have been already said. I think the key points are already mentioned. What I can add on the top of that is maybe speaking about the innovation, because this is actually something that the transition that we are observing right now is an expensive one. So it means that innovation is also a long and very ambitious process that costs a lot of money. And we can observe from our regional perspective also that there is actually a great ecosystem, a lot of different motivated companies, startups, research centers. They have ideas, they have the motivation, they have willingness to participate in this transition process. Simply what they are missing is the funding. So we are also helping them as a cluster to obtain the funding necessary to launch their projects that can be national, regional, or European one. So I think that the money is also something that we should be speaking about because it's an important thing. And also I think about also the launch of the new innovative products on the market. So basically the market launch, the market scale up, this is still something that is causing some troubles to some of our members. Basically, even if they have this innovative, green, digitally performance product, it's still difficult for them to launch it really on the market and to work on it afterwards.
Thank you very much, Melga, for that opening thought, and we will talk about innovation as well. And Susan, coming to you to set the scene for our conversation, tell us about your work and what you're focusing on.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks again for the opportunity to speak this morning. Susan Costello is my name. I'm the Network Director of Biopharmachem SkillNet, so we're based in Ireland. And I suppose our remit is we work with organisations, so we're in the biopharmachem sector, obviously, in relation to their skills and talent development. So very much the skills agenda is what we would be focusing on. So we're co-funded through SkillNet Ireland and our member companies. And really our remit is to look and see what are the skills and talent challenges that our members are experiencing? Where does that upskilling need to happen? How do we work with them to help develop and retain their talent? And what are the challenges that are coming down the track for them? So like that, looking at the digital transformation, looking at sustainability, looking at equality, diversity and inclusion. Obviously, how do we the challenge of recruiting into the STEM sector, and there's a number of different initiatives that would be running in Ireland to try and encourage more participation and more secondary level students going into third level to study the STEM subjects and then to come on into the industry.
Well, there's a lot there. Everyone's pointing at specific focuses for you. So we'll try and unpack all of those. But to start with, let's lay the groundwork in terms of understanding what the value chain is for the industry, because we talk about the value chain or the supply chain. The focus on raw materials tells us that it's not all focused in one area. I mean, and I think, Susan, you're talking about even getting secondary level or tertiary level students involved in that, so these are a long chain to getting the skills supply through as well. But Athanasios, from your perspective, how does the value chain work in this industry, and how does it compare maybe to other industries in terms of length, in terms of complexity, and where are the, if you like, key bottlenecks?
Well, you have to realize that the chemical process industry is an industry that it is very slow in changing. There are huge installations. Raw materials, are almost exclusively based on petrochemicals, fossil raw materials, not only organic, but also the inorganic that are essential components. And then there is, and these materials could be coming from everywhere. Everywhere you can get them at the right specification, right prices. Then there is, the transport. There is the processing. A very general rule is that you need very large plants in order to be competitive. So this issue of large-scale installations will have to be dealt with, and maybe this is where some innovation could be used. And then you are distributing depending on the market again worldwide. So it's a very complex value chain that needs to be managed. You cannot stop. So if you have, let's say, some lack of critical material or some disruption in your supply chain, the entire process is shut. And all of this is a very live and evolving situation that sometimes involves shocks when some materials do not become available, or maybe too many people are after the same material. So there is also sometimes volatility, and definitely there is a cyclic nature to the industry. And sometimes you have capacity that you cannot meet. And on top of this, then you add, because this is also part of the value chain, the environmental compliance. You have to be always, following what are the regulations in a cost-effective manner, and make a profit and maintain the jobs in the sector. And you get the idea.
Not always straightforward. Monica, I'd like your take on this as well, to build on what Athanasios is saying in terms of the complexity of the value chain and supply chain, but also bringing in the importance of being able to monitor your fellow partners, whether that's upstream or downstream, particularly when it comes to things like the green transition and understanding where compliance might be necessary and how much work you have to do with the partners in your supply chain.
Yes, I cannot be more agree with what Athanasios said. So what we observed and what was clearly shown by the pandemic, that there were these shortages with the supply chains and the access to the critical raw materials. And also what we try to advocate for and support our partners is, of course, the reshoring of the basic chemical production in Europe. This is something absolutely crucial. The other thing with the supply chains, and I think it's also very related to what was said about innovations and fundings. So if we really want to make this value chains efficient and probably as short as possible, we also need innovations, and we need new technologies. And this is quite a long-term process. It's not something that is happening from one day to another, and it requires time. And this predictable regulation is something that is very expected from the industry, also to ensure this value chains and also to ensure what companies can expect in future. We recently we had a very intensive discussion about, for example, the PFAS regulation and how it may affect the chemical industry, the value chain, the production, the international competitiveness. And what we also observed, that there's no this common approach through the different regions, for different stakeholders. So it's not something that everybody is agreed. And we are still, for example, waiting for the assessment from ICA. And companies, what we can hear from them, that they really struggle with this lack of the predictability, and that whole regulation process also takes quite long. So this is something that really affects companies. But also what I want to say, that to improve the value chains, it is also the issue of the awareness where the processes can be improved, and the awareness that some technologies are already on place and there's no need to invent something from the scratch, and can be simply replicated and can speed up the process. So I would say that's the most pressing challenges we can observe from our members.
Well, Malga, let me come to you and ask you to tell us a little bit about, Monica's mentioning there, if you like, the sharing of best practices, the sort of being no need to reinvent the wheel every single time. When it comes to innovation, I mean, where does the value chain fit into that? I mean, who is doing the innovating? Are companies encouraging partners to do it? Is there a shared sort of ethos that says we all need to innovate together as an industry? Or is there that level of competition? Because of course, competitiveness is also important.
Yeah, well, I think that when we speak about innovation, we can really see that the whole ecosystem needs to work together. So at Accelera, we have right now around 400 members. So those are the 3/4 of them are the companies, startups, also large multinationals, and 1/4 are universities, research centers. So what we can see really on our local level is that when we speak about the innovation, we put those people working together, and they work on a new project, new product, a new process, and so on. So basically, we can see also that within our members, we have some actors with the profile of the chemical producers, mixture manufacturers, and producers of articles. Our network, or maybe our job as a cluster, is to create the ecosystem, to know what are the competences of the people, what are the skills, expertise, what is also the technological capacity. And once we hear about the project, we try to link those actors with another actors within our network so they can work together, and we help them also to obtain the relevant funding. Myself, as a European manager, I accompany the people to work, but I simply help them to create a project, to receive the funding and to work together. So after a few years, we can also see the first results. It's true that it's a long process, but it's a necessary process because no transition can happen without those innovative projects.
As a quick follow-up, I mean, to what degree would you say skills shortages are creating a barrier to innovation? Malga.
Well, I think it's a crucial. It's a starting point, I think.
Susan, that's bringing me on to you because let's talk about where innovation can come from in terms of the skills. And the same question to you, is skills shortages a problem in this sector in general? And is it in the area of innovation? Is it in something like compliance, knowledge? Where are we looking at gaps?
Yeah, so definitely it's working on the whole ecosystem, as Malga has said, in relation to that value chain. You know, in relation to I suppose the work that we would do, it's a collaboration really between industry, academia, and the state agencies in terms of understanding where those skills shortages are, what we need to do in relation to the development of new skills. That innovation piece is so important, the research and development. So I think, yes, in terms of, I suppose the development of the new skills, research is key, and the funding into that research and development help to drive that innovation to see, where is this heading? So certainly a lot around, green chemistry, and we do see the universities even now, there's a lot of those new programs come in terms of green chemistry, looking at sustainability, trying to drive that change really. And often things can be slow to change. So I think, as Monica said, it's quite a long process. So, I know even here there was a new report released in April 2024. So the expert group on future skills needs, having a look at the biopharma sector within Ireland, and, what skills are going to be required coming down the track in relation to this industry. So that's something we can share in the chat.
Absolutely, Susan, because I know people always ask for links to these sorts of information and reports when we mention them. And I will say that anyone who wants to put their questions to our panelists, or you've got a point to make, or you've got some added input into some of the topics we're talking about, do either raise your hand, use the Q&A, or indeed the chat. Athanasios, I mean, you've got a scientific background, so I mean, you have some insight into the skills that are needed. Where would you perceive the skills shortages to be in the sector? And in particularly taking into account the transition, the green transition, because certainly chemicals industry has been around for a long time, but maybe this new focus on the targets that the European Commission is asking the industry to reach is changing some of the skills that are needed.
I'm a little bit contrarian in that matter, saying, the skills are already there. The issue is really if you are going to switch a lot into your way of making the chemical. So earlier in the process, you are able to introduce sustainable materials, the less of these modifications downstream you have to do. And in fact, this is a proper way to apply a circular way of knowledge now and expertise. Digitalization by itself will not produce the products, and it will not make it will not bring you green resources. So when we talk about skills, I think we have to distinguish between two groups: skills for the existing workforce, who is already extremely well trained, extremely productive, and able to deliver as it has delivered until now the products, and skills for the new people that enter that seem sometimes to be overloaded with too much information and maybe missing the point. So if you want to talk about skills for the existing people, not everyone is necessarily has to be reskilled. However, there is an enormous amount of knowledge which is being lost daily as people are retired from the industry. I was very recently in a major chemical process industry, where the person who was responsible for all the development and so on retired, and it was clear that with him also a lot of non-tacit knowledge was going to go away. So in some of the traditional sectors, maybe the challenge is to maintain that. In some of the newer sectors, like in the pharmaceuticals and bio, there it seems one way of approaching is discovery of new materials and so on. So there is an enormous effort in trying to do a lot of things through computing, computer methods, including machine learning, AI, materials discovery. There you need to hire, to bring in experts that are already proficient with this kind of technologies, but they lack the domain expertise. So there is also a kind of inverse problem here, is not only skilling, skills for the existing people in the industry, but also teaching the skills of the chemical process industry to the digital people that are being hired, and they have to develop a certain domain expertise. Either way, it is going to be, as I think Monica mentioned, a very long process. All transitions take 50, 60 years to establish, and it will not be in a calm sea. It will be a lot of waves along the way.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure if we have 50 or 60 years in some areas. Susan, something sparked off your reaction.
Yeah, so just to Athanasius' point, and I think it's a very good point in relation to that tacit knowledge piece. So we're certainly seeing a huge amount of work being done in the area of knowledge management here, where like that companies are faced with like that people retiring and the loss of that valuable knowledge that they have and that you don't find captured in the SOPs. So there's a massive amount happening in relation to that area, and then the use of maybe like the technology, looking at augmented reality and looking at ways to capture as they can that tacit knowledge before it leaves the site. So yeah, just a really good point, Athanasius.
Monica.
Yes, the skills, it's a very complex topic, and many things can be said, and we are also involved in a couple of projects, but I would like to say something. I don't want to say it's a complaining, but I think this is something that might be solved on the European level. Because when we prepare the project applications or when we are invited to the projects related to skills, one of the crucial elements of the projects are platforms where the trainings are uploaded and provided for participants, students, or already people who work in the sector. However, the number of these platforms, it's really huge, and people can be absolutely lost when they can find the proper information, the valid information, the proper trainings, where the quality of trainings is sufficient and ensured. I think that there should be something like a skills hub or skills gate, where not the trainings will be uploaded, but the links to the trainings provided by different institutions, and where people can filter the trainings through country, language, sector, whatever, but like one gate where people can have access to a wide range of skills provided by different institutions, because otherwise these platforms where we upload the effects of the projects can simply die just after the project is finalized. Of course, we need to ensure the sustainability of the project, but to be honest, no one really cares about what is happening with these trainings afterwards, after finalizing and accomplishing the project. So that's my suggestion regarding the delivering skills and ensuring that the skills are simply well, the trainings are useful for the sector, for the people who are supposed to work in the sector.
Thank you, Monica. And of course, I remind anyone who's taking part, if you know of such a platform or if you have any ideas on it, do pop them in the chat or put them in the Q&A. Malga, you had a point you wanted to make.
Yes, I will continue the speech about the competencies and trainings that can be also developed under the EU funded projects. I used to work previously on many Erasmus Plus projects, and what we used to do, and that might be also a good practice for you, is maybe not necessary to create a MOOC, but rather to create a catalog of different competence blocks that you will be publishing or sharing with the public as a form of a podcast, as a form of a webinar conference that you will be also recording, and also a mixture of this one-to-one on-site training. So this is also what we used to do. We target a small group of participants on a local level, and we did the same process in different European countries. We created a European curriculum that was simply displayed in national languages in different countries. So that might be also something that I think is bringing something new to the training, to the upskilling, professional upskilling. It's good also to work with the workers. I think this is also something that was already mentioned before. Workers, they have already a huge amount of competences and skills, but I think that it's always good to think about them and to continue upskilling them. And for the format of the training, I think that this what is very interesting recently is a new format, are podcasts and recorded webinars, seminars, conferences. So this is my recommendation.
Well, since we are talking about recommendations, and thank you very much, Monica, for coming up with the first one, I want to get from all of you your feedback to the transition pathway of chemicals, to the Commission in general. I mean, we've talked a little bit about that skill thing, but perhaps, Anathios, what's your feedback on the platform, on the progress we're making with it, and whether you have any suggestions for how things could be bettered, or warnings, dire warnings about pitfalls to avoid?
Well, I will be very, very frank. It's a very complex and too lengthy, too long and too big on the one hand. On the other hand, this is essentially a wish list, okay? And a wish list that includes everything. And we know that we cannot do everything. There has to be a certain prioritization. This is what the roadmaps try to do. But I know that conveying this entire plan and grand design to the people on the front lines that are doing the job, it will be difficult. What I find lacking in the transition pathway plans is contingency plans. What happens if something will not wrong? And I want to emphasize this because every time that each one applies for a project to get EU funding, the contingency plans are something that it is a make it or break it criterion. So I would like to see also contingency plans that are realistic, because things don't always come out as we wish.
Good point. Susan, perhaps I could get your thoughts in general about what sort of advice or feedback you have. As Athanasios says, it is quite daunting, that 192 recommendations for actions. Breaking that down, I think, would be useful for people. But what else might be useful?
Yeah, I do agree with Athanasios in relation to it's that roadmap to prioritize what those are, like 190 recommendations. It's huge. So it's being able to take that in bite-sized chunks and have that kind of the clear plan and the order of priority. Where is it that they want to look at first, and how does that feed into the next recommendation? So maybe to have a kind of a clear roadmap on it, and a contingency plan in relation to if a recommendation doesn't work or can't be followed through, well then what next? So I think it's great to be able to capture all the things that we would love to see, and it would be brilliant to deliver on them all. But yeah, maybe to understand really where the priority lies and how we can best address this.
Well, it's good to be ambitious as well, but also good to bring in the note of realism as well. And again, as always, our attendees and our participants are welcome to put their thoughts in the chat. I'm going to have a question now from Slido once again, so for everyone to answer, but I want the panelists to think about it as well, because I'm going to ask each of you to respond. So if we click on your Slido link again, I hope everyone has still left it open, or you can scan the QR code once again. How can clusters support the transition of the chemical industry? And indeed, how can the clusters really assist in managing some of the, helping to break it down into bite-size, the pathway that the industry is on? I'm not seeing anyone voting on it just yet, but let me turn to the panelists first then. Malga, I mean, how would you sort of characterize how clusters might be able to help the transition?
Well, there is a lot of things to do, and actually we are already doing a lot of things. Of course, some of the activities were already mentioned. Monica, she mentioned also that, we help also to pass the information that is concerning the legislation. Also, different calls for proposal that are launched by the European Commission are being consulted with our stakeholders. But I think that basically what is our main role is that we should be, as a cluster, this innovative project factory. So we have to have the good visibility of what is ongoing within our ecosystem. We have to link different actors together so they can actually launch a project. And we have to have this competence and capacity to guide them and accompany them and assure them that they can also do the project. So we are very, very active at Accelera also in doing so. Last year was especially active. We have more than 40 innovative projects that were launched and funded. I'm not speaking about the projects that we have launched, but we have not received the funding. So basically each year we have all of the different actors involved in this innovation process. And here I really would like to take the opportunity also to underline the extremely important role of startups, because they are really very often at the very beginning of the project idea. They're launching a project, they're extremely active, they have the courage to propose different solutions, and they also closely collaborate with different companies, with different research centers. So there is a lot of things to do. We also, another thing that we do is it is all that is relevant to the event organization. So basically we help also our actors to network. We also help them to get the knowledge. So we organize different technical events, conferences, webinars, seminars. We also inform them about the EU regulation or the national regulation that is concerning them. So there is a lot about networking, a lot about the communication, a lot about upskilling, and a lot about innovation. And I think that innovation is really the core of our activity.
Well, that's echoing some of the points that I'm seeing people are raising on our Slido. So awareness raising, in general, awareness raising on legislation in particular, and inspiring by showing best practices. So I think that all of those are things that you've mentioned. Monica, your thoughts on how clusters can support the transition? What would you choose? And you can see there on the screen as well, on that word cloud, lots of suggestions.
Yes, exactly. So basically, I could sign what Małgorzata just said. So it's a matter of collaboration, cooperation, exchange of the best practices, exchange the information, also exchange the failures, because this is also important that something doesn't work. But I would say it's also creating a culture of cooperation, because sometimes especially companies treat themselves as a competition. So it's important that, okay, on the local market, maybe they are the competition, but when we go look a little bit further, they can simply cooperate and create an added value. And from our point of view, it is also important that we are the network of regions. And it's a little bit different perspective because we need to bring together very different approaches. So we cannot look only on the industrial point of view and general income of the industry, but we also need to take into account the social impact of the industry, the environmental impact of the industry. And because we represent regions from all over the Europe, we also can see differences between different regions from different countries, and trying to find the common vision that everybody can accept it. It's also very important that the option to find some kind of golden solution, let's say, it's also important that everybody, maybe it's not super happy, but at least they are happy with the for example, statements we prepare. So this is also important that they know each other, they know what are the other views on the particular topic. So this is also very, very important from our point of view.
Susan, your thoughts again on this question about what clusters can do. Obviously, you're seeing here that there's possibilities of feedback, of networking, of enhancing cooperation. I mean, all of these, I presume you would agree with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important that the clusters work to, facilitate that innovation and collaboration. They can certainly help with the shared resources and the infrastructure. If they can, like shared facilities such as the labs, the pilot plants, the testing centres. Obviously, access to infrastructure can really accelerate kind of the development of the green and digital innovations. Enhancing knowledge and skills, which is really where we sit, as our network. So really, so that's what we would work to, that exchange, that networking of knowledge and best practice, the workshops, the seminars, the conferences, and then obviously we have the specialized training programs to help upskill both the current workforce and then the future.
And Athanasios, your thoughts as well. I mean, I see there's a strong connection needed between industry and research, but also all those other points about collaboration, sharing best practices, finding markets as well.
Definitely all of the above, but because you have to be also a little bit, more precise on something, I would say that clusters, and especially meta clusters, meaning clusters of, inhomogeneous activities, although there are even clusters that are, not single thematic, are actually ideal test beds for industrial symbiosis. This is it's a buzzword, but actually we must develop very good examples that can be shown as first of a kind adoption, and they are a very important tool for de-risking and bringing more people into it. So for this, I would say that there would be a need for specific calls to enhance and promote industrial symbiosis examples among clusters. One more reason for that is that in the area of feedstocks and raw materials, if we are talking about non-fossil raw materials, all these are dispersed. So they are all over the place, and you need to develop these symbiotic patterns that will lead into long-term collaborations and maybe fusions. One can imagine that for the chemical process industry to transit to the next level, this is pretty much like a biological process. They have to be mutations and get inspiration from Darwinian evolution. So definitely clusters are ideal battlefield for industrial symbiosis, first of a kind, launching industrial symbiosis first of a kind projects, but this cannot be done by itself. So I would actually call for targeted calls for this type of action.
Malga, you wanted to add something just before we wrap up, so.
Yes, well, I joined the idea very much, and actually this is already something that many European clusters are doing and have the possibility to do, and I think that we have to continue. I think the chemical industry is a very transversal industry. We can really work with a lot of different sectors. In France, Accelera, we work closely with different clusters on a national level, with energy cluster, polymer cluster, health cluster, mobility, transport, and so on. So this is already something that we have put in the place, and we would like to continue, and we would like to continue on the European level. I think it's very important to give us as clusters this possibility to have new collaboration opportunities, have more funding to bring different networks that we already have created on the national level to the European level. I think that the collaboration is a good recipe for the success.
Well, thank you very much. We've had quite some suggestions. We've had quite some advice. Not so many questions from the audience today, but I see there just in the chat that the Caffeine Project has prepared the 5 years joint action plan, which will be implemented through the ECCP platform as well. And that includes the trainings and experts database. You can find the link for that in the chat. And also the Transition Pathways Stakeholder Support Platform that's going to be launched by the Commission will indeed be a one-stop shop for stakeholders to find the different learning and training resources. And that's tailored to each industrial ecosystem, and will also include funding opportunities and pledges made by other stakeholders as well. So you can find out there. So some of your suggestions already being started to be implemented, Monica, there. So thank you very much for sharing those thoughts in the chat. And thank you once again to our panelists for a really interesting and directioned discussion today. I think we've got some good suggestions that I hope will be taken forward. With that, I think we're going to move on to looking to the future once again with Nina and the funding opportunities, and tell us a bit more about what we can look out for and what we can also find on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform.
Many thanks, Jennifer, and many thanks also to the panelists. I just want to highlight at the end of our session some calls that are currently open and that might be interesting for you. One is under the Horizon program, which is titled Biotech Routes to Obtain Bio-Based Chemicals, Materials Replacing Animal-Derived Ones. So here projects are expected to contribute to novel, scalable, and more sustainable biotech production routes for bio-based and non-animal derived chemicals, to look at the performance of bio-based chemicals and materials, the availability of safe and sustainable by design bio-based products, and of course the positive socioeconomic impacts and social acceptance of circular bio-based solutions and products. So apply for this call until the 18th of September if you're interested. You see the topic ID in the screen, and we will put the link in the chat so that you can read more about this call. It's published on the EU funding and tenders. We touched on circular economy, and there is a call which is looking at resources from waste, air, water, soil, noise, chemicals, and New European Bauhaus. So here the aim is to facilitate the transition, of course, towards a toxic-free environment, as well as to protect the quality of the environment. And projects should aim at developing, demonstrating, and promote innovative techniques, methods, and approaches, contribute to the knowledge base and to the application of best practices. Best practices is something that we talk about, as well as the development and enforcement of EU legislation and policy, and the large-scale deployment of successful technical and policy-related solutions. And this is under the LIFE program, so a LIFE action grant based on budget. So the deadline is the 19th of September. Please have a look at the funding and tenders portal when you click on the link in the chat if you like to learn more about this call. And maybe a more general one, but also looking into good practices. So this is titled Experimentation and Exchange of Good Practices for Value Creation. So projects should look at the transfer of valuable knowledge to the economy and society by increased interlinkages and cooperation between the knowledge actors. So looking at academia, at research, but also at the industry, public administration, and the society. And the project should contribute to new solutions to the societal and economic challenges, as well as improve structures, strategies, practices, and skills for knowledge valorization. This is a horizon call with the deadline of the 25th of September, published on the Funding Intenders portal. So have a look at this. Probably also a very interesting call to look at. And last but not least, the reminder that there are several calls from the Euroclusters open. So these are very concrete opportunities targeting SMEs in different sectors, either for innovation projects, for networking activities, for internationalization, and also for training. So the Euroclusters, which are joint initiatives and of clusters supporting the green and digital transition in their respective ecosystems, publish these calls to target SMEs and to give them financial support for different activities. We invite you to have a look at the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, where all of these calls are published, and you can check whether there's something interesting for your respective ecosystem, so that your SMEs and your networks can apply for these calls and to get further funding for their innovation, training, networking, or internationalization activities. And with that, have a look at this during the summer. As you see, many deadlines are approaching in September.
Thank you very much, Nina. Indeed, we are going to be taking a summer break, but do save the date for the next talks. We'll be back on 4th of September. I don't believe registration is open just yet, but make sure to stick it in your calendars and keep an eye on the platform to when registration does open. And as always, do continue the discussion over on our LinkedIn discussion group. And you can find that there. It's the European Cluster Collaboration Platform general discussion group, and you can click on the link that you can see on your screen there on the slide, or directly in the chat as well. There's also lots of social media options for you. You can follow along on the actual website itself, clustercollaboration.eu. You can go to X or Twitter at clusters_EU, and of course there on LinkedIn as well. And if you want to get the attention of others who are following along these talks, use the hashtag EU Clusters Talks and the hashtag ECCP. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. And again, a big thank you to the panelists for a really interesting discussion. And we hope everyone has a lovely summer break. Watch out for those deadlines, and we'll all be back in touch again in September. Have a great day.